Alright, let's talk about private equity. It sounds like something you'd find in a dusty corner of a bank, next to proprietary trading and a signed photo of Gordon Gekko. But the truth is, it's everywhere. Think of private equity as the ultimate house flippers, but for entire companies. A private equity firm is a group of very wealthy people who raise an astonishing amount of money, not from the public on the stock market, but from other very wealthy sources like pension funds and university endowments. They then use that massive pile of cash, plus a whole lot more that they borrow, to buy companies, hoping to sell them a few years later for a hefty profit. It's that simple, and that terrifying. This whole industry didn't just appear overnight, it really took off in the 1980s, a decade famous for big hair, questionable music, and something called the leveraged buyout, or LBO. This was the magic trick. Buy a company using mostly its own money or by loading it up with debt. It's like buying a house with a giant mortgage, having the tenants pay it off, and then selling the house. The pioneers of this turned it into an art form, creating a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We're not talking about small change here. The global private equity industry is now valued at over $7 trillion, which is more than the entire economies of Germany and the United Kingdom combined. It's a financial monster hiding in plain sight. You've probably heard of the biggest players even if you didn't realize it. Firms like Blackstone, which manages around $1 trillion, that's a 1 with 12 zeros, are titans of this world. Then there are others like KKR, Apollo Global Management, and the Carlyle Group, each controlling hundreds of billions of dollars. These aren't just companies, they are financial empires. When they decide to buy something, they can buy almost anything. They are the power players, the ones moving colossal pieces on the global economic chessboard, while the rest of us are just trying to figure out why our favorite brand of socks suddenly costs twice as much and falls apart after one wash. The reason you should care is that their decisions directly impact your life. They might own the company that makes your food, the hospital you go to, the software your job uses, or even the nursing home your grandmother lives in. They are the invisible landlords of the modern economy. They operate behind the scenes, away from the daily scrutiny of the stock market, making massive changes that affect workers, consumers, and entire communities. So, while the term private equity might sound boring and abstract, its consequences are very, very real. It's a force that is actively shaping our world, whether we like it or not, and it's probably time we all started paying a lot more attention. So, how does this money machine actually work? It's structured like a very exclusive club. The private equity firm acts as the general partner or GP. They're the managers, the deal makers, the ones in the expensive suits. They put in a little bit of their own money, maybe 1 to 3%, just to show they have some skin in the game. The rest of the cash, the other 97 to 99%, comes from limited partners, or LPs. These LPs are institutions with deep pockets. Pension funds managing your retirement savings, university endowments, and sovereign wealth funds from other countries. They hand over billions, trusting the GP to make them even more money. Once the fund is full of cash, the GPs go shopping. They aren't just buying a few shares, they are buying entire companies. And their favorite tool is the leveraged buyout. Let's say they want to buy a company for $100 million. They won't use $100 million of their own fund's money. Oh no, that would be far too simple. Instead, they might put down $30 million and borrow the other $70 million from banks. And here's the kicker, that massive $70 million debt isn't the private equity firm's problem. It gets placed directly onto the books of the company they just bought. The company itself is now responsible for paying back the loan that was used to buy it. It's a brilliant, if ethically questionable strategy. For their troubles, the general partners reward themselves handsomely. They typically charge a 2 and 20 fee structure. That means they take a 2% management fee every single year, just for managing the fund, regardless of whether it's making money or not. On a $10 billion fund, that's a cool $200 million a year for keeping the lights on. Then comes the 20, which is the performance fee, or carried interest. After the LPs get their initial investment back, the GPs get to keep 20% of all the profits. This is how private equity billionaires like Steven Schwartzman of Blackstone and Henry Kravis of KKR are made. It's a system designed to generate immense wealth for a very small number of people. These funds don't invest in just one thing either. They are incredibly diverse. They buy tech companies, like the software specialist Thoma Bravo does. They buy healthcare chains, fast food restaurants, manufacturers, retail stores, and everything in between. If a business generates cash flow, it's a potential target. The goal is to hold the company for about 5 to 7 years, make it more efficient, a word that should make any employee nervous, and then sell it for a profit. They can sell it to another company, take it public on the stock market, or in a move that feels like financial recycling, sell it to another private equity firm. The machine is designed to keep running and to keep making money for those at the very top. Now, to be fair, private equity isn't always a villain in a pinstripe suit. Sometimes it can actually be a force for good. Proponents will tell you that they are experts at turning struggling or inefficient companies into lean, mean, profitable machines. A private equity firm can swoop in, provide a struggling company with much-needed capital, bring in a new management team with fresh ideas, and streamline operations. This can lead to innovation, growth, and the creation of a stronger, more competitive business. A well-managed buyout can save a company from bankruptcy, preserving jobs and creating long-term value that benefits everyone involved, from the investors to the employees. A classic success story often cited is the Dollar General Corporation. Back in 2007, the firm KKR took the discount retailer private. They invested heavily in the company, modernizing its stores, improving its supply chain, and expanding its footprint across the country. They focused on its core mission of providing low-cost goods to budget-conscious consumers. When KKR took the company public again just a few years later, it was a resounding success. The company was stronger, more profitable, and went on to become a retail giant, employing tens of thousands of people. In this case, the private equity model worked as advertised. They bought a company, they improved it, and they sold it for a profit, leaving it in better shape than they found it. However, for every success story, there's a horror story waiting in the wings. And often, that horror story involves crippling debt and ruthless cost-cutting. The pressure to generate those high returns within a few short years can lead to disastrous decisions. We're talking about mass layoffs, slashing research and development, selling off valuable assets, and loading the company with so much debt that it can barely breathe. A notorious example is the tragic demise of Toys R Us. After being acquired by a consortium of private equity firms, the beloved toy retailer was saddled with billions of dollars in debt. Every dollar of profit it made went to paying off interest instead of investing in its stores or its website to compete with Amazon. The result was inevitable: bankruptcy, store closures, and 30,000 lost jobs. This is the fundamental dark side of the model. The private equity firm takes on very little of the risk. Remember, the debt is placed on the portfolio company. If the company succeeds, the firm makes a fortune. If the company fails and goes bankrupt under the weight of that debt, the firm might lose its initial investment, but it's the company's employees, its creditors, and its community that suffer the most devastating consequences. The firm's partners, having collected their 2% management fees for years, still walk away wealthy. It's a system of heads I win, tails you lose, where you is often the average worker just trying to make a living. So, what's stopping these financial titans from doing whatever they want? Well, there are some rules, but they often feel like putting up a garden fence to stop a tank. Regulators like the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, are supposed to ensure fairness and transparency. For instance, the Hart-Scott-Rodino Act requires firms to notify antitrust regulators like the Department of Justice before making huge acquisitions, as KKR learned the hard way with a massive enforcement action in 2024. Furthermore, once a private equity firm takes a company public, they are subject to all the usual securities laws, meaning they can be sued for misleading investors, as several recent court cases have reinforced. These laws are meant to prevent the most outrageous abuses. However, the industry has historically operated in the shadows, and many argue the rules don't go far enough. For example, there's a big push for greater transparency on the fees they charge, as those fees directly impact the returns for pension funds that millions of people rely on for retirement. There are also growing concerns about liability. A 2024 Supreme Court ruling involving Purdue Pharma made it harder for private equity owners to use a company's bankruptcy to shield themselves from lawsuits, signaling that courts are starting to look more closely at who should be held responsible when things go horribly wrong. But this is a constant battle between an industry that wants less oversight and regulators trying to protect the public. Looking ahead, the world of private equity is likely to get even bigger and more intertwined with our daily lives. One major trend being discussed is giving regular retail investors, that's you and me, access to private equity through our 401k retirement plans. On one hand, this could give people access to potentially high returns. On the other hand, it would expose the life savings of ordinary people to the high risks and high fees of an industry famous for its lack of transparency. This is a massive deal, and it brings the debate about risk, reward, and regulation right to our front door. The future will almost certainly involve more scrutiny, especially in sensitive sectors like healthcare and housing. Ultimately, this all matters because private equity is no longer a niche corner of finance. It is a dominant force shaping our economy. For lawyers, it's a booming and complex area of corporate law, from deal-making at firms like Latham & Watkins to litigation over fiduciary duties. For workers, it can mean the difference between a secure job and a sudden layoff. For all of us, it influences the cost and quality of goods and services we use every day. Understanding how this powerful industry works, its methods, its motivations, and its impact is essential, because when a handful of people in a handful of firms can control so much, their decisions become everyone's business. And we need to be watching. We absolutely need to be watching.